Welcome, everybody. As I said before, this is Mission San Juan Capistrano's online watercolor lesson. My name is Jessica Crossman. I'm the Director of Education here. Melanie Rayburn, who you also see on the screen, will be leading the lesson. She is our artist in residence here at the Mission. So before that, I turn things over to Melanie. Let's remind ourselves what the supply list is for today. So since it's a watercolor class, your supplies are watercolor paints, a paintbrush, watercolor paper, a pencil, any kind of black marker, and water for dipping your brush. To get us started, for a little bit of inspiration, we have a video that we took around the Mission showing the subject of our watercolor class for today, which is the koi fish that live in the Mission fountains. So I'm going to play just a really short clip just to show you and give you a little bit of inspiration, and then I'll hand the class over to Melanie. So here we go. So you might notice that there's all different kinds of colors of koi fish that you see. Here at the Mission, we have white, orange, speckled. I know that we have had black koi fish in the past, although you won't see any here. All kinds of beautiful fish we have. And this fountain that you see is our fountain in the central courtyard of the Mission. It's kind of the featured centerpiece of the central courtyard. All right, so there is your koi fish inspiration for today. I am going to now turn the class over to Melanie and get myself out of here, give you the screen.
Alrighty, hello everyone, welcome on Facebook and on our Zoom. Again, my name is Melanie, artist in residence here. I did study art and art history in school. I went to Cal State Long Beach. I've been an art teacher for about 5 years, and I've been here at the Mission for about 2. We've started doing sketching workshops as well as these virtual art classes. So glad you guys are all joining us today, and I'm hoping we can do more of them. If you have an idea of a subject that you might want to see, please share it with us via email or even through the chat on here. We'd love to get some input on other things you guys might want to see. This is our second watercolor class, but we've also done a pastel and also just a simple sketching, coloring with colored pencils virtually. So we like the watercolor. It's easy, fun, and materials are pretty accessible. So I'm gonna turn my camera over and we're gonna start showing our setup here. So I have our sample picture right here that we're gonna be working from. Let me straighten out this. Now mine is about, I'd say like 5 inches by maybe 7 or 8. You guys can make this as big or small as you want. I just traced my paper on the one I'm going to be doing today. But yeah, you guys can pretty much go with any size. We're going to start obviously though with a quick sketch of where our fish are going to be and add a couple little lily pads. So we have our pencil, the fish. We are going to just start out with a simple oval. So I'm going to start with my middle fish. I'm going to use really light lines because I don't want to see my pencil marks once I put my paint in. So I'm going to think about how big my fish might be on my page. Do a nice like skinny oval, kind of angled. You guys see that okay?
It is a little hard to see, Melanie. It does help when you lift it up, but I wonder, I know that sometimes the camera placement can be a little difficult. I don't know if you can get it a little closer, perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's great. That looks a lot better. Thank you.
Okay.
I like your thicker line. I can definitely see that.
Cool. All right, so I have a nice oval. It comes off into a tail up here. So I'm gonna kind of imagine where my tail is. They have nice, graceful body. So I'm gonna connect. And the tail is just kind of like a V. And it gets narrow and then it opens up and gets fat, connects to our fish's body. The front fins kind of come off pretty early on, nice, graceful, and it kind of rounds out. Do the same on the other side. We'll give everyone a minute or so to catch up to here. Again, I started with a nice oval, get the fatness of my fish, figure out where his tail's gonna be, and then connect it with a nice, graceful line. I'm gonna go in and erase any lines that I don't need. And then for his fins, they just kind of just do like a little bumpy line coming out to them. They do have kind of more of a squarish mouth slash face. So if you want to maybe flatten out the front where his mouth would be. Pretty big fish there in the middle. And then we can put a little eyeball here kind of towards the front of the face, the fin. Nice little line and a little circle underneath. Gonna erase these lines. So I just have a nice outline of one fish. Give everyone a second to catch up. We're gonna be adding other little details like little fins on the top, the kind of mustache they usually have. We're gonna add that with paint. We're not gonna bother with our pencil. So I'm gonna do another fish kind of above, curving around this one. I'm gonna start the exact same way with a nice oval, get the size, kind of angle. Gonna think about where I want his tail to go, kind of down here. And then really make sure that you get that narrow to fat, because that'll really help you make it look like a fish. So go narrow and then goes fat to that oval where the main part of the body is.
And when you have a moment, Melanie, could you hold that up just for a few moments so we can see up close?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The fins will be basically the same. They kind of come gently off and curl down. And then I do a like kind of bumpy line coming back to the body. Gonna square his face area off a little bit where his mouth would be. And then this one, it's kind of cool. We're almost looking right above him. You can see both his little eyeballs. So if we want to add those in kind of either side where the fin starts, do a little arch and then a little half circle inside each of them. I'm going to erase any lines I don't need. Luckily, they erase pretty easily because I kept my lines nice and loose. We're going to do one more little half fish. sometimes when we draw where you want to draw the whole thing and we don't want to see like parts of it, but realistically, we wouldn't, you know, everything wouldn't fit into one frame. So I like having kind of this half fish coming off from the bottom here. So I'm going to imagine he's coming from this lower corner. Same thing, kind of do a nice oval. The fin coming out from the side. And maybe this side it goes off the page. And then I'm gonna do the same thing where I make his face area a little bit square. And I'm just gonna put in the detail of his eyeball too, so I know where it is. Maybe a little half eyeball on that side. So there we have our very simple pre-sketch before our painting using pencil and light lines. And we're gonna start mixing our colors for our painting. So we're gonna do pretty much only one technique today with our watercolors, and it is called wet into wet. And it's basically we're taking wet paint going into wet paint. So I have my kind of Crayola paint set here. I'm actually pretty impressed. The quality is not too bad. This is only like $3. And I just have kind of a, it's not the paintbrush that came with it, but it's kind of a more narrow tip paintbrush. So I like to have a little more control. Have my water, and I'm gonna mix up our first color, which will be kind of like a blue-green. Now I'm just doing it in the lid here. And what I'm gonna start doing is taking some water from my cup. I'm gonna put it into my lid. I need quite a bit because I'm gonna do the whole background with this color. So I need to have quite a bit of water as I put color into it. So I have blue and green here. I'm gonna start with a little bit of blue, pick it up with my paintbrush, mix it in. This is kind of a bright blue. So I'm definitely gonna add a little bit of green to it because I want it to be more of a turquoisey color. The more water you have, the lighter it'll be, and the less water, the darker it'll be. And I want mine to be kind of just like a medium, nice, light blue-green. Now, if you have a little spare room, you know, on the top or bottom of your paper, you can test your color. I think mine is a little bit too bright. If you think yours is a little too bright or you like it, that's fine. I'm gonna add actually a little bit of orange to mine. Orange is the complementary color to blue, and orange will help you to dull the color. So I'm just gonna add a tiny bit, make it not so bright, and get a more dull kind of turquoise color. Let's see what that looks like once I've mixed it in a bit. So let's see the difference. Well, it's not that much, but I do like it a little less bright. We can see here at the top. Now I'm gonna add some more water. And I'm gonna get started painting the background. Now I'm gonna be really careful to paint around my fish. I'm gonna work from top to bottom. It does help sometimes if you have a tiny bit of an angle, lift up, you know, the top to help you carry that water down. You just kind of use gravity. However, if you have too much, it'll drip down and go through your fish. So if you're not feeling confident in your control of the paint, just leave it flat. That's totally fine too. I'm gonna go ahead, I have my color, pretty happy with it. for my background. Now, once I paint the whole background, what I'm gonna do is take a little bit of my blues and my green here, and while it's still wet, I'm gonna dip in some color in the background. So we'll see how that goes. So make sure everyone has their color, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm just gonna fill in all around my fish. I think I am gonna use gravity a little bit and just tilt it up. So you can go pretty fast on big areas. Just when you get closer to your subject, you just gotta slow down a bit and be really careful on those edges. You can see how my water is pooling right here. So that's just, I'm using gravity to bring it down. I'm gonna come back up here. Just being really careful to go around my fish. See, I got a couple little drips. I can just pull those down and around my subject. And if we're painting a big surface like this with watercolor, you kind of don't want one area to dry. So that's why I am leaving it a bit wet as I'm splitting around the subjects, because if it dries, you do have kind of this weird line that starts to show up. Once I get around the second fish, it'll be really easy just to bring the whole color all the way down to the bottom. And we are going to be outlining our fish. So, you know, the edge, we don't have to worry too much about it, because then we're going to use either our paint or a pen to give a nice outline, really define our subjects. See, like that pool that I had right there could have dripped down through my fish. I don't want that. I want to make sure I bring it around. And then pretty much now I just fill the rest of my space here. Hopefully you guys mixed enough paint. It does get a little frustrating when you don't have enough of the color you're trying to paint and you're having to mix more while you're painting and while it's wet. All right. So I am at the bottom. I've painted my whole background. And now what I'm going to do is that wet into wet technique. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue. So I got blue pigment on my paintbrush, and into the wet paint, I'm just going to maybe do some water lines. Maybe do the same thing with green and kind of use, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yep, there you go. I was about to ask you to do that. Thank you.
Use that wet paint that's already on your paper. Use it to help you mix this wet into wet. And might even take a little more of my other color and mix it in. So I would stick with like a blue and greens. However, I don't know, maybe if you want, you throw some purple into there.
We have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is, why are you adding more like kind of different colored blues onto the blue that you just painted?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to make it look a little more water-like, and that those differences, the fading of other blues and greens into it, will kind of help me to get that technique of it looking like water. So it's probably one of the most used watercolor techniques. Just taking wet paint and putting other wet paint into it. So yeah, just giving it some variance, I would say. So I kind of made mine kind of swirl around my fish, just because that's easier to do. And I'm also taking some of my original coloring and just layering it on top, maybe taking a little water, spreading it around. Essentially just trying to make it look a little more water-like. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Got some, colors swirling around. Got a nice wet into wet wash here. That's what it's called, a wet into wet wash. Now I'm just cleaning up any areas where it kind of looks a little funny, like it didn't fade right. And there we go. I'm gonna let it dry a little bit. And while I let it dry, I'm gonna mix up kind of a dark green for some of the lily pads that are on our background, you see here. So I'm gonna take another little separate tray. I'm gonna take some green. Now the green on this set is kind of bright lime green. So we are knowledgeable about the color wheel. We know the complementary color to green is red. And if you mix red and green, eventually, if they're the prime red, you will get gray. But if we put a little red into our green right now, it'll just help us to darken it and dull it a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna do. I want kind of a darker green. I might even put a little blue in it as well. I want like a deep foresty green. Test my color up there. It's pretty good. So we got green, a little bit of red if our green is too bright, and perhaps a little bit of blue. We're gonna put in a couple of our lily pads. Now we didn't draw them because the shape is pretty simple. We can just paint them in. They're round and then they have a V in the middle. So we can do that. I'm gonna let mine dry just a tiny bit more. And we can see compared to the flat wash, when I did just my base color all the way down, we just have just quite a bit more interest, and it looks a little bit more like water with those extra colors we added. We're gonna do the same technique on our fish. It will just be with smaller, less colors though. If you want to test your paper, usually we use the back of our hand, so we're not getting our fingertips all dirty. It is still pretty wet, I'm kind of okay with that. So I think I will go ahead and kind of the maybe drier areas and do a couple of lily pads. So you guys don't have to do them in the same spot as me, but I'm just gonna fill in some of my empty areas with these. And again, it's a circle, but then you leave like this little V shape in the middle. And I actually think I want my green a little bit darker. So I'm gonna add a little more red in it. Do a littler one. Maybe one up here. And if your paint's really wet, it will fade in quite a bit, but that's okay. I think I'll do one over here too. So don't go too crazy, just a few in there where you think it might make sense. And if you want, you could probably make them a tiny bit darker than mine and it would still be okay, look okay. But I'm gonna stay with the color I have. Do one more up here. All right, there we go. So we'll give everyone a moment or two to catch up here. If you want, you can clean your brush. I got a paper towel here to dry mine. And we'll start with our fish next. So our fish, usually koi fish, are, as Jessica said, kind of an orange, yellow, gold. They usually do have these fun speckles, like black speckles or orange speckles if they're like a more white color. I think we'll try to make this one more white and yellow. And then I think these two will be our orangey red ones. Now we can see, and these ones I have here, we see orange, right? But we also see maybe like a lighter yellowy orange. We have black, and this was all wet into wet when I did this. They were wet, and I just added these colors in together, and they mixed nicely on their own. That's how we're gonna do ours. We're gonna start by mixing some colors though.
Melanie?
Yeah.
So somebody's asking if you could perhaps slow down a little bit.
Yep.
And maybe you could hold up the painting in progress for a couple moments just to give them a chance to see what we've done so far.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could maybe, yeah, side by side, kind of cool.
Yeah.
If you push it a little bit, yep, there you go. You got it. Just to remind everybody, if you have joined late, either on Facebook or on Zoom, we will have this video up on Facebook since we are live streaming there. And we're also going to put it on our website. Our website just got redone and we have a whole section for our video collection. So this video, along with the pastel online art lesson that we did a few weeks ago, are going to be in that new section of our website. So if for some reason you missed the beginning and you want to go back, these videos will be there and also on the Facebook page. Whenever you're ready, Melanie.
Okay. So I'm going to start mixing a kind of a red orange. I'm going to clean out one of my little cubbies here in my lid. I'm going to start the same way with some water. So I got one here, one here. The first color I'm going to do is like a light orange. So I'm going to start actually with yellow. I'm going to use quite a bit of yellow in my water. And it kind of looks a little green because there's some leftover blue in here. I'm going to put some orange into it. Maybe even some red if I get to orange faster with the red and yellow. And I want this to be pretty light, almost like a golden color. I'm going to test it here at the top. It's pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit more water so it's a tiny bit lighter. And then in this one, I'm going to go for a little bit deeper red orange. So I'll start with some red, put in some orange. This to be like a nice deep red color. Let's test that. I'm going to go with a bit more orange. All right. I'm like getting the rainbow up here. Got red, orange, yellow, green, blue. So for our fish that is going to be white, I'm going to check, make sure my paper is pretty dry around it, because otherwise when I go down in with some paint, it's going to bleed out. And we're going to do wet into wet for him, as I said, but we're actually going to start with just our clear water. So the water that we're using, we're just going to take some of that and we're going to put it in our fish. Now you won't be able to see it, but I'm just going to paint the whole fish in with my clear water. Now, when I drop little drips of these other colors I mixed into it, it'll kind of bleed in very naturally and look almost like a real koi fish. So let's try it. I'm going to start with my lighter orange. I'm going to drip it kind of near the side. Just kind of drip the paint in and let it spread out on its own. Do a couple drips in the tail. See how that's spreading out really nicely? I'm gonna do the same thing with my darker orange color, just not as much. I'm just gonna do like one or two. And I kind of like to go on the edge because you don't want to just have like a bunch of dots in the middle of your fish. That'll look kind of weird. So yeah, try to get it towards the end, towards the edge, perhaps. And this one, I don't know what's going on with that one. That one bled weird. But yeah, there we go. Got a nice white, speckly, orangey koi fish. So we'll give everyone a chance to get to here. if you think you might want to go in maybe even with a darker orange or perhaps a red, you can do so, obviously. I think I want to kind of clean up that little line along there. And see how that just fades into each other nicely. Really makes it look natural. Now I'm going to do the same thing with a tiny bit of black. Now black is like super dangerous when it comes to watercolor because you don't want to put too much because your colors will just get super muddled and mixed together and everything will be brown. So I'm going to give my fish another second or two to dry, and then I'm just going to do just a couple little drops with black. As you can see on this one, that top fish has just a tiny bit of black in him. So I've just barely picked up a tiny bit of black. And I think I'm going to put a little bit in his fins here, kind of on the edge, maybe kind of here in the middle of his head, kind of spread it out a tiny bit. And I'm going to go right here in his back of his tail. Just put a tiny bit, let it just fade in on its own. Maybe a little down here too. There we go, just a tiny bit. Just getting those natural speckles that koi fish have. We are going to do this fish basically the same way. Just instead of starting with our clear water, we're going to do our light kind of yellow orange color we mix. So if you're kind of running low, go ahead and mix a little bit more. I need to do a tiny bit more. So this is going to be our base color, and then we're going to drop in some red, orange, this color here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in my fish here with my light yellow orange color. And hopefully your background is dry by now. We don't have any risk of our colors bleeding together. But if not, maybe just be a little frugal on your edges. All right, so I'll make sure our paint is wet. So then when we drop in our darker color, it'll bleed in. So I'm gonna go ahead, fill in, drop in some color, spread it around a little bit. You can even do like a bunch of little quick dots. You just want to try to make it look natural. So get along the edges, get in the middle. You don't want to just do like dot, 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 you know, along the middle, because that's not it's not normal. Now I think that this color I have might be a little bit light and I want it to be darker. So I'm gonna quickly go to my red, mix in a little bit more red to this color. I want it to be a teensy bit darker. And I can just put that maybe in the center of the other color I dropped. So then it looks just like a darker version of that color. And it could be totally random. You can just mix it in. Just want to see some changes of color. There we go, that's pretty good. If you find you have any paint that might be pooling in places, you can dry your brush quickly, and then it almost acts as like a little vacuum, can soak up some of that extra color. And you can dry your brush again. Just because we don't want anything dripping around. I'm gonna make his head all orange. I want his head to be a little bit darker. Another technique for the wet into wet is if you do have a little piece of towel, paper towel, you can kind of dab away and then it can go white. So I might actually put a little bit of white in this guy. There we are. And I'm gonna let it dry a second, and I'm gonna do the same thing where I kind of put in some black speckles. While I'm waiting though, maybe I can come down here, do my other fish. Maybe this one, I'll start out with the darker color. Yeah. This one's a super orange fish. Maybe I take some red straight from my palette and put a little bit of red in him. Or orange. There we go. Kind of looks like a rainbow sherbet fish.
Melanie, the light's catching on that. Could you tilt it maybe slightly more towards you? Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. As my fish is drying a teensy bit, see a little puddle here that formed when I tilted it, so I can pick that up. I'm gonna go ahead in with my black. Again, I'm gonna be super careful, just gonna use the tip, just get a tiniest amount of black. Put in a couple little black details, and my paint is still wet, so it'll just kind of naturally fade into it. I still like to do little kind of dots because it looks more natural instead of just like a line, kind of dot it in. And kind of like this fish, I'm gonna do this like on his side, black. And my paint's a little dry there. That's why it's not fading super nice. We're not mixing the paint. We're more just letting it mix on its own. You guys can do exactly what I'm doing in the same spots, or you can kind of do it on your own. Totally up to you. I'm gonna put a little bit in the fin. Oops, I smudged my fish there. That happens.
We have a question, Melanie.
Yep.
So the question is, this person says, I like the unoutlined fish versus the outlined fish. Then it says, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what this person's trying to ask. So they're saying, can you show the areas that need to be outlined? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll probably do my outlining with my paint. That's what I did in this one. Basically, I just kind of defined the edges a little more, especially the fins. The fins look a little bit muddled right now. You know, they do have details on their fins that you can see. And then definitely the mouth area. You kind of want to highlight that mouth area with a little bit of either outline or just something. But yeah, you definitely don't have to if you don't want to. Obviously, naturally, it wouldn't really look outlined like this, but this just makes it a little bit more bold. Makes it a little easier if, you know, we have weird edges like I kind of do.
Could people outline with a marker instead of paint?
Yeah, once it's dry, you can totally do it with a marker too. So I'm gonna add a tiny bit more black to my fish down here too. He's getting a little dry, so I have to make it look wet into wet naturally without it being wet.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt again, Melanie. Could
Yeah.
you maybe push your painting a little bit further up on the table? Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So there we go. I am pretty happy with that. Nice fade that we got in all our fishes. And as I was saying, next I will be doing just a simple black outline. I do have a marker. I can do maybe one with a marker and one without so we can see the difference. So I'll give everyone a second to catch up here, get our wet into wet fishes done with our color variances. You'll notice while I was putting black into that, I smudged with the side of my hand this fish and it got kind of red. Totally happens, normal. Not much I can do to fix it unless I want to maybe use some of my dark green and paint over that and make it into another lily pad. It's one way to solve that. And we do want it to be pretty dry before we start outline details. So that's why I was just testing my fish. He's still pretty wet. So I might have to give him another second or 2 minute to dry a little bit more. Let's see this pen I have. Oh, just kidding. That is dry. That will not work. I've had that pen a while.
Do you want me to bring you a marker, Melanie?
If you have, yeah, like a fine point Sharpie or something like that.
Okay, I will bring one to you.
Thank you. So giving everyone a chance to catch up here, letting our paintings dry. If you're just sitting there waiting for it to dry, you could always, grab a paper. Most watercolor artists do have like a blow dryer nearby them, so then they can dry and move on a little bit quicker to their painting. So I got a fan. I can fan mine a bit. And then we can test it the back of our hand. So little details we'll add. We have our eyeballs, mouth, kind of our fin detail. They have usually, a little fin along the top of them, and then some tail detail as well. So I'm going to test out, I'm going to do this one here with my outline. Going to just get the tip of my brush. This is when it's really good to have a very fine tipped brush. But again, I'm going to show, I got my Sharpie, I'm going to show one with a Sharpie too, so we can kind of see the difference.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking, have you ever used a fan to make ripples to imitate water in the watercolor paint?
I have never on purpose done that, but I have used where I had a hair dryer and the water kind of like went whoosh, like that, but it wasn't on purpose. I actually was mad that it did it. But yeah, that's an interesting technique to try, test it out. So I'm going to start with my fins. So I'm going to kind of trace the upper edge of my fin. And then I'm going to make like little tiny like lines coming from the bottom of the fin up towards the inner fin. So then it kind of looks like it's fanning out. I don't know if you guys can see that little detail. So I was starting towards the bottom and bringing it in towards the inner part of the fin. I'm going to trace along the edge of the body here. I'm taking this straight from the tray. I'm not mixing it with any water. I'm trying to get the most like concentrated dark black color I can. I'm just going to gently trace along the edge of my fish where his body meets the water. When I get to the tail, I'm going to do kind of a similar thing where I'm going to come from like the top of the tail and I'm just going to bring a couple lines inwards. So then it kind of looks like a fin, I guess, like a tail fin. Just those little details really make it pop. I'm going to do the same thing on this fin, little detail lines. especially towards the edge. And on this fish especially, the part where the water meets the fish isn't super clear. So just with this outlining, I'm defining it. This is the fish, this is the water. There's not like these weird gaps. Once I've done the head, what I'm gonna do is kind of make like a little small, like little sliver of an opening. I don't know if it'll be just very small. And then just give like the little tiny whiskers that koi fish have. And it looks like his mouth. So once you're here, you've outlined your fish, you can maybe do his little fins on the top of him. These are kind of done the same way as our dots, except it's not wet. So I'm just gonna go kind of along what would be the spine of the fish, do a little dots, little line of dots. Some smaller, some bigger, maybe bigger towards the middle and smaller towards the edges. There we go. And I have totally put my hand in my fish again and smudged my paint. That is me not paying attention. So we traced or outlined one here with our paintbrush. Let's do this middle one. If you want to do it with your paintbrush again, totally fine. I'm going to do this next one with a fine point Sharpie or any other, permanent marker would work for this. And I'm gonna give you guys one more sec because I don't want to rush. Here we are working. So if we are using marker, we just want to make sure our paint is fully dry before we start any sort of outlining. I'm going to start at my tail. And I'm going to try to do the same thing I did with my brush, where I kind of bring a couple lines from the base of the tail in towards the fish. I'm going to do that on both of them. I'm outlining too, but just adding some fine little kind of like hair-like lines. Here's a close-up. So then it kind of looks like a tail. Obviously, this is much more thin and narrow than our paintbrush lines. We just want to make sure we're trying to get right where the color of the body meets the water. So for the fins, gonna do the same thing, little detail lines. Gonna start at the tip. Just bring these little kind of angled lines in. And then the edge of the fin up and around. Same thing on the other side. And I'm switching the length of them, so they're not all the same lengths. There's little differences. This one, I've kind of lost the point, so I'm gonna have to try to make that. I want it to be slightly pointed there. I just have a little bit of orange spilling out of my line right there, but that's okay. Small detail. Now I'm gonna do the same thing as the paint. I'm gonna make like a little mouth opening. Don't know if you can see that. And add some little whiskers. There we go. Now we didn't do it on here, but I would suggest doing eyes because they are so tiny and we do want them pretty black with our pen. So I'm gonna go up here to this fish. I'm gonna fill in my eyes with my pen, my permanent marker. Just his little eyes that we could see. And same thing, fill in this eye. We have just one more fish to go. This fish is looking a little rough for me. So, I don't know, what do you guys think? Do we like the pen or paint better? I like the pen because it does get quite a bit darker. I don't know, my black paint that I have here is going more gray than black. I like the really dark black. So I'm gonna go in with the pen on this one. Gonna do the same little fin details. And our eyeballs. Which I think, did I draw? Yeah, I drew a little eyeball, right? The other eyeball's down here. And if you are here with me, we are almost done. We just have to do the little spine on our middle fish. We will do that with paint rather than marker. So I am going to get my brush again and my black paint, and exactly how I did it on this one, I'm just gonna give this guy a little kind of arcing spine, doing my dots. And again, I just made it a little bit more tall at the middle of it and then narrower towards the ends. And there we have our koi fish drawing, painting. So if you wanted to, another thing you could do is outline your lily pads. Mine are kind of mushy looking. I like them like that though. I really want the focus to be the fish. Always remember to sign your drawing, painting, whatever it is. Put a little initial, something in it. Sign that it's yours. As I said earlier, if there are other subjects that you guys might want to see, you know, or even mediums. We've done pastel, we've done watercolor, and then we've done kind of just a simple drawing. So if there's other things you want to see subject or medium wise, please share it with us. We definitely want to do more of these. And if you have any thoughts, please share them. But thanks so much. And I hope your koi fish look as cute as mine. And feel free to share your picture if you'd like on Facebook and tag us. We'd love to see what you created today. So thank you so much. Any last thing to say, Jessica?
No more questions, just people saying thank you.